Leo Ferguson here, bringing you the facts about Ebola. Per Dr. Manoj Jain, a nationally recognized infectious disease specialist and fellow Memphian, Dr. Jain gave us generously of his time and expertise recently. So let's watch the following interview excerpts, which will enlighten us about how Ebola relates to what's known about the devastating Black Death of the 14th century. And it's comparing. She wants us to compare. Ms. McFalls wants us to compare the Black Death to current day Ebola, the similarities and differences. So the questions are going to be asked.
So you remind me again about all the Black Death.
Written by Edgar Allan Poe, famous writer, as you know.
Yes.
It's about. It's pretty much a copy of what happened in Europe around the year 1347, around that time, and there was a deadly plague going around called the Red Plague instead of the Black Plague, and this rich, very wealthy noble, or prince, excuse me, it was a prince, who decided that he thought that isolating himself as well as all the other wealthy people would protect them from this plague. Obviously, they were very wrong, and they end up dying at the end with actually, can we start that? Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am Leo Ferguson, your current classmate, and I am here today with no other than the famous Dr. Manoj Jain. He is an Indian American physician and writer. He specializes in infectious diseases, and he practices right here in Memphis, Tennessee. Dr. Jain was born in a small town of Mahou, India. In 1973, he moved to Boston, where he attended Boston University for both college and medical school. He is a world-renowned expert in his field of infectious disease, and he has written on medical issues for Washington Post, New York Times, and Commercial Appeal. Written by Edgar Allan Poe, famous writer, as you know.
Yes.
It's about. It's pretty much a copy of what happened in Europe around the year 1347, around that time, and there was a deadly plague going around called the Red Plague instead of the Black Plague, and this rich, very wealthy noble, or prince, excuse me, it was a prince, who decided that he thought that isolating himself as well as all the other wealthy people would protect them from this plague. Obviously, they were very wrong, and they end up dying at the end with actually, can we start that? And the Prince Prospero, invited all these nobles, rich, wealthy nobles, into his castle for a big masquerade to get their minds off of this disease of people who are dying outside of this huge castle. And as the party goes on, there's 7 rooms, and each room sort of has a different type of light. There was orange room, a blue room, all of them different colors, and there was one room that was just red. It was just blood red. And there was some man, anonymous man, that was going around the party that everyone was noticing, like, who is this person? Who is this man? Prince Prospero got really upset, got really mad, decided to go confront him. Mm-hmm. When he confronted him, he took off his mask, and everyone gasped, and he sort of freaked out too. And as he's walking out of the castle, Prospero gets a dagger and tries to stab this anonymous man. And before he can do anything, he just stops and he falls to his death. And everyone starts bleeding, blood coming out of everyone's mouth. The whole room everyone dies. I think it was irony saying, you can't hide from death. You know? Mm-hmm. And that's what they tried to do. So now, with the current Ebola case, yes, we are talking about that. We are here, and I'm going to interview you on the differences of the Black Plague and current day Ebola. Are you ready, Dr. Jain?
I am.
He is ready. All right, people. So I've got my list of questions.
Hang on one second. Okay,
Jane.
Yes.
Question number 1.
Okay.
If Ebola is contracted, is there a known scientific measure that predicts recovery or not? And how many days after showing symptoms can you turn it around?
Sure. So it's really important to talk about the clinical progression of Ebola. What we know is if someone contracts Ebola today, meaning if they came into contact with someone which is an Ebola patient, then for 21 days they can manifest symptoms at some time. Sometimes they may not even be infected. But during that 21-day period, the first set of symptoms that people present with is low-grade fever, then it gets to be high-grade fever, then nausea, vomiting, right, headaches. That can happen anytime. Now, when the disease progresses after that, then people have intractable diarrhea and vomiting, and they are highly infectious at that time. Okay. Before they get those symptoms, they are not infectious. Now, in our clinical experience, the earlier we catch patients with Ebola, the faster is their recovery and more likely that they will survive. We know that if we're in that late stage, right, when they're having severe nausea, vomiting, like the first case of Ebola, Eric Duncan, in Dallas, we got him at a later stage of the illness, and that we could not save him. In other cases, like the 2 nurses, we got them at the early stage, and that's why we could save them. So that's the big thing. There's no single test that's a marker that can tell us that we will be able to save them, but sooner the better, and we give them the support, which is fluid hydration and the new medicines that are being tested.
Good. According to an article I recently read on ABC News, it was posted in July.
Okay.
It had a correlation between the 2 diseases, saying that Ebola and the Black Death were basically the same thing. Do you agree? If yes, tell me more information on how they are alike, and if no, why are they different?
Sure. So, as you know, Black Death was a disease that occurred in the 1300s in Europe and really decimated nearly 50% of the population. Now, when you look back historically to some of the data of what was the agent that caused Black Death, it appears to be a bacteria called Yersinia pestis. And that bacteria is carried by rats and fleas, and it infects humans. I don't believe that that agent at that time was Ebola, because many of the characteristics of the disease manifestation at that time described in the literature was much more towards this bacteria, the bacteria Yersinia pestis. And from what we know, Ebola is more so transmitted through bats, and also from the data that we have, that the epidemics have been generally occurring in Africa, not in other parts of the world. So historically, it doesn't make sense to say that Ebola was the causative agent of Black Death in the 1300s.
Dr. Jane urges us to remember the age of globalization and travel. It's primarily education, not isolation, that can help us avoid a health disaster with this virus known as Ebola. Leo Fargstein, reporting live.